As we begin, I'm going to begin. So my name is Jack Baum. Hello everyone and welcome to Connecting Isolated Jewish Communities, a panel discussion. So this is presented by Debra Brunner, who will be chairing the discussion. And our panelists here today, we have Dani Rotstein from Mallorca, Whear, representing Norwich Liberal Synagogue, Norwich Liberal Community, Artur Livshyts from Minsk, and Marcel Odina from Barcelona. I am the lead moderator for this session, and I am here to ensure that this session runs as smoothly and safely as possible. Please let me know if you have any concerns or questions by messaging me using the chat function. In order to make this a welcoming environment and to show off the fact that this is irrelevant because this is a webinar, we were also relevant. If you have a question at any point in the session, you should message me using the chat function, as I just said. The way that a webinar works is you will notice at the bottom of your screen there is a Q&A box. This enables you to ask questions to the presenters. I will be managing the question, and I will see as you ask each question if it's necessary to ask then and there, or if it should come later. And then if you would like to ask a question to a specific presenter, make sure to mention that in the question, and I will then be reading them out. I hope you enjoy this panel discussion, and I'm once again pleased to introduce all of the panelists. Over to you.
Thanks, Jack. As Jack says, I will be running this session, and it's going to be a session that's very relaxed. It's more of a discussion rather than anything formal. Where I'm very excited to have been able to have connected to Marcel in Barcelona, to Dani in Mallorca. Artur is obviously part of us, and to Lily in Norwich. I've been to the Norwich community. I know lots of people in the Casa Adret community in Barcelona. Dani and I have connected recently, and he has fascinating stuff going on. And I'd like to hope that you will come away from the end of this webinar really enlightened with a little bit more knowledge, and that we will come away that bit more connected. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of the panelists here to just give us a couple of minutes each to just tell us a little bit about who they are, introduce themselves, a little about the community or the communities that they represent. So Dani, I'm going to start with you. So if you unmute, give us your introduction.
Thank you so much, Debra and Jack and everyone at the Together Plan. It's a super special honor and privilege to be on this panel today and participating in the first ever online event for you guys and with you. So my name is Dani Rotstein. As you can tell, I don't sound like I'm Spanish or from Mallorca. I'm originally from New Jersey in the United States, and I've been living here for 5 years. And just a quick summary of my story is that I moved here thinking I was going to be the only Jewish person on the island because I hadn't done any research really, and I came here for work, for a job, and found out that there was actually a synagogue here that was started in the 70s by British expats, Jews who came to the island to retire. And I went in, and it was very small, very, very elderly. It is an Orthodox shul, separated with men and women. And that's when I learned of the existence of a group of people called Chuetas. Not going to get into it today, but basically these are people who carry last names that everyone knows that they are descendants of the old medieval Jews from the island. And some of them have been returning to the community. So basically, there is an Orthodox synagogue here on the island that's about 30 or 40 years old, but it is aging out, right? So not many members, we don't get a minyan, there's no rabbi, nothing like that. And so my wife and I, Carla, who's from Barcelona originally, we 2 years ago founded a cultural organization called Limud Mallorca, part of the greater Limud organization that many of you might be familiar with. And we are trying to build a new community, one that is open and inclusive and is non-denominational, formed around social and cultural gatherings, gets together for the holidays, and is really has a focus on youth and education, both for adults and kids as well. So two communities kind of, but we're trying to keep it all together because just because you're in one doesn't mean you can't be in the other. So it's a bit of a side-by-side thing that we're going with, and that's what we're up to here in Mallorca.
Fantastic, thanks, Dani. Marcel, over to you. We're keeping it in Spain at the moment.
Hi, Debra, and again, as Dani said, I'm like very happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation, and it's wonderful to meet all of you, and I can't wait to hear all your stories. On my side, well, I'm from Barcelona originally. My family's from Barcelona, and I was raised in the then reformed, now conservative community here in Barcelona. After some time, around when I turned 20, I went abroad to study. And also around the time, a lot of young Jews from the community here, which is also in itself quite small, like you don't get real numbers because you're not allowed to poll people specifically on religious beliefs, but it's just estimated that it must be around uh, 8,000 maximum. And it's right now there are between 4 and 6 communities, depending on how you count. So it's always been pretty separate. And as I was saying, when I was studying abroad, a group of young Jews from several of these communities got together and made a cultural magazine, Jewish magazine. It started almost as a blog to kind of discuss the different topics of Jewish culture. And that ended up evolving into a whole cultural platform that promotes Jewish culture in all its different variants, from cuisine to music, etc., in several different ways. That platform is called Mosaica, and I joined it some 3 years ago when I came back to Barcelona, and now I'm acting as the director. And we're currently we have managed to recover the oldest building, the oldest residence actually in Barcelona, which belonged to a medieval Jewish family, in order to transform it into a Jewish cultural center, which we now also share with the AAPJ, which is the European Association for the Preservation of Jewish Heritage and Culture. I'm very happy every time that I remember all the words there. Which is the Pan-European Association that serves precisely that. It preserves European heritage and promotes it throughout all of Europe. And which I think Debra and with the Together Plan, you're also part, yes. So right now, yes, I am working Casa Dret, and from there we try to promote, we're a secular institution, but we have formed a bit of a community of volunteers that has gotten quite big over the years, that work in all kinds of different areas in the promotion of Jewish culture. So yeah.
Great, thanks Marcel, thank you so much. Lily, tell us a little bit about the Norwich community.
Hello, I'm Lily Whear. I'm a student at Durham University, and I'm a member of the Norwich Liberal Jewish community, which is quite a small community. I think there's about 60 members in total in Norwich, in kind of the east of England. And if you know anything about UK geography, Norwich is very, very separate from the rest of the UK, and there are very few, train links. It's very much like you either go from Norwich straight to London, and then you have to go to London to get anywhere else in the UK if you're travelling by train. And at first I felt very, very isolated when I joined this community, because I grew up in Surrey. I grew up going to a London synagogue, a much bigger synagogue, and to come to a community where there weren't many contacts with other synagogues, there weren't many Jewish people my own age around, I found very, very difficult. But as I kind of grew older within the community, I found a place leading the singing in the community. So I always do Kol Nidre, sing Kol Nidre, and I've been doing that for the past 5 years. And I've been able to take a much more active part in services than I probably would have in other synagogues, because there aren't as many members, and I've been able to really enhance my Jewish learning and my Jewish identity through playing a more active part in the synagogue. There aren't many other young people. I think my family, my 3 siblings, make up most of the young population in the community. But I think it's a nice place to be and to feel comfortable knowing everyone, and I get a lot of support from that community. So thank you.
Very interesting. Thank you. I'm going to come back to you with a few questions in a minute. And Artur, give us a little an overview of well, there are lots of communities of varieties in Belarus. Just if you can sum it up in a short few minutes, if that's possible.
Yeah, well, as you said, the varieties of communities, and they usually say 2 Jews, 3 synagogues. Here we've got few Jews and lots of communities. Well, I mean, I think it all goes back to the beginning of the independence and all of the Soviet Union, when there was a lot of flow of the freedom of religion and denominations, and lots of people were able to practice openly and openly be Jewish, not just Jewish, Russian Orthodox, Catholic. So there was the freedom suddenly felt onto everyone's head. So everybody ran on to doing what they wanted to do. And in Belarus, basically, we've got 3 main Jewish denominations, which is Reform, Lithuanian Hasids, and Chabad. And those, each of them, they've got from, I guess, from 10 to 20 communities. There's also the other part is like a cultural centers, like a Jewish community centers, which are also called the communities. They're secular communities, non-religious communities, but they practice traditions and they practice Judaism not in a religious form. And there are also probably, I don't know, around 20 of them around. There's smaller organizations. So from what I say, it seems to me that there is a very vibrant Jewish life in this country, which you can't count on numbers. I would probably say that the Jewish communities here, the majority and the main focus of the Jewish life is in the bigger cities, where there's synagogues exist, or where there's bigger centers, and where there is bigger funding, because most of the funding to the communities come from a wealthy big charities, whether in America or in Israel. I mean, Chabad has its own funding as well as everywhere in the world. But I would say that most of the communities that we are trying to help and empower, they're not in the central cities. They are outside, they're on peripheral communities where some would say, why waste time if there is 50 or 100 Jews there, should concentrate on the bigger cities. But we believe that everyone has to have a chance to live a Jewish life and to have an opportunity to practice Judaism or to learn the traditions or to be able to learn about its history, culture, heritage, and be a Jew in his own town. If he doesn't want to go anywhere, he should be allowed, and that's our main focus. And I would probably today be speaking on behalf of myself as a Jew in this country, not as a member of any community, but as a person who has been involved in different communities, who has been involved in different cultural and charitable organizations, and finally found my own destiny, I would say, which is the Together Plan, and things that I like to do to help the communities. I love to do because I feel it deeply in my heart, and probably I'll be speaking from that angle, looking onto the Jewish life and the Jewish communities in Belarus.
Thanks, Artur. It's very interesting because Lily says that she feels, connected. She sings. She plays an active role because of the music, which is cultural, but it's also religious on her side. And in the UK, we haven't had our sort of line broken in terms of you can't be Jewish anymore, or you're going to exile you out of the country, or there's a pogrom. So it's our isolation is more geographic, and as Lily says, her family are the youth, the sort of remaining youth in that community. So there's the sort of thinking around what will happen to that community as Lily and her siblings grow up. Whereas in Spain and in Belarus, for me, what's coming through is there was, terrible oppression, anti-Semitism, forced conversion, you can't be Jewish anymore because of the Soviet Union. And I know that Dani in Mallorca and very much so in Casa Adret Mosaica in Barcelona, and very much so as part of what we're doing as the Together Plan in Belarus, it's about finding your way back to community through the history and the heritage, and finding who you are with your identity. I can see heads are nodding. I'm going to just put that one back to Dani to start with, and get your thoughts on that.
Well, it's a rather incredible point you bring up, and one that we're very passionate about over here. Let me start with the devil's advocate. Most people who don't agree with me will say, why, Dani? Why are you trying to get these people who were raised Catholic, who have Catholicism in their family for hundreds of years, to return or to share with them the interest of Jewish culture? Don't you realize, Dani, that they're not going to be passing it on to their children or their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren? Why are you investing so much time into this concept? And it's true. Exactly your point that you said about how do you have, children that are grow up for the future of the Jewish children, for the Jewish future, if you have people who are coming back to the religion in their 60s or 70s, and it's going to end with them. I feel very strongly with the fact that we have a debt to our history. We have to talk about our history. We have to learn about our history in order to prepare and know where we're going in the future. And so, yes, it's very simple for me to say, all right, all expats of Mallorca, you're from the US, you're from England, you're from Germany, you're from Israel. Let's all grab together our small little group here, because we know what Jewish community can be like from our home places. And let's just do our own expat thing in this island. And I disagree strongly with that, because I believe in the power of being welcoming to everyone and to forming something together that's cohesive. Not to put Marcel on the spot, Barcelona is a much larger city than the small, tiny community. We have maybe, the numbers again are up, but we think maybe up to 1,000 Jews on the island, but I know of maybe 300, 400. And to understand everything here, we have 20 paying members of the synagogue. We struggle to get a minyan on Friday night. That's the only time the synagogue's open. We don't have a rabbi, we don't have a chazan, we have one Torah that never gets taken out of the ark, because we don't have 10 Jewish men in the Orthodox tradition, which is what the synagogue belongs to take it out. Barcelona is much larger, and fair enough, they have many different communities because they have different types of denominations and how they operate. But I think it would be a travesty to do that here on our small community, to break up into small little groups. So we're really encouraging this, people who want to learn and explore about their Jewish roots to come be a part of people who were, born Jewish or converted to Judaism, but from different parts of the island, so that we could all do this together. That's kind of, my perspective on it.
Great, thanks, Dani. Marcel, anything to say on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is true, to kind of pick up where Dani left off. It is true we are a bigger community, but to hand it back to you, it's not, really a lot anyways. So, I mean, realistically, maybe 5,000 Jews in Barcelona, of which I know only a portion going to shul. And even though there's more space for diversity, it could do as a community to be more integrated, and like the different strands of different communities to kind of have more integration, which I have started to see happening recently. You are starting to see a lot more joint projects, which I think is a very, very positive development. But on our side, yeah, we're also looking, even if it's good that there's this diversity in the ways in which people practice and express their Judaism, largely related to the fact that the Jewish community here is composed mostly of recent, at least from the immigration from the 20th century. for the most part, from all kinds of different places in different waves. So you have people who came from the Balkans and Turkey way long ago. Then you have others who came from Northern Africa and Morocco. Then others more recently who came from Latin America, and like you see like the differences between them, and traditionally they've been very much tied to the heritage that them or their families have brought to Barcelona. And what we're trying to do a bit is kind of bridge that reality that we have nowadays in the community with people, you know, who are Ashkenazim from Argentina or Sephardim from Morocco, et cetera, to connect that to the heritage and the Catalan Jewry, kind of bring people. On the one side, obviously, what we want to do is visibilize and normalize the fact of Judaism as a part of daily life in the wider society, but also a big part for us is connecting this this tradition that was somehow broken several centuries ago and bring it into the present. Even if we're not gonna go and tell people in like the conservative community, no, now you have to follow the Catalan Siddur. That's not what it's about, but it's about like knowing that, oh, this place is where people were, and this is, you know, and feeling like, yes, this, now that I am in Barcelona, my family is in Barcelona, and possibly will be in Barcelona, I feel connected to this heritage. And as a Jew, this is something that belongs to me personally and I identify with personally. And that for me is very important. And it's something that myself on a personal level, I am coming to grips with constantly, because I wasn't brought up knowing the Catalan Jewish heritage. And I am still kind of getting to know it without that meaning, yeah, I'm going to change how I practice Judaism, possibly, but not necessarily. Just feeling a sense of connection to it.
Okay. Very interesting. Thank you. Artur, anything to add to that?
Well, I believe that the communities in Belarus will revive, or probably I would say survive, only if they go back to the heritage and history, only if they will keep this direction developing and sort of go back to their roots. Otherwise, I don't see, because the interest, the younger generation is not much interested in the religious stuff. You know, they're not much interested in going to the synagogues and praying. Whatever was attractive for them was not offered by the synagogue, but was more offered by non-religious organizations, Jewish community centers. Less interested now, less money, less activity, no more interest. Chabad is trying to attract younger generation, but it's a very narrow, I mean, you know, because of assimilation and because of the war and because of the mixed marriages, you can hardly find, you know, Galactic Jews in this country, unless it's a very small proportion. So the only interest that we have noticed and is the way forward is the heritage and finding out about yourself, who you are, and then going on to more of a Judaism, practicing, getting to know how it was. Otherwise, you can't move from 0 to the 11th grade, you know, in one step. That's impossible. You'll fail the exam. So that's my view on it.
Okay, thank you. Lily, I'm going to come back to you because you said you felt isolated. You moved to Norwich, and geographically it's difficult to get to where the sort of the hub of sort of young Jewish life is, and that's mainly in London. And And I'm just wondering whether if we sort of tip this on its head, which we're now hearing from sort of people in Spain and people in Belarus, former Soviet Union, and we have a youth movement, which I mentioned to you when I came to Norwich and gave a talk about how we've got young adults who are, you know, all sorts of places around the world who are sort of engaging in their, in a much deeper level into their sort of Jewish values, and also who are we, right? As a sort of a young sort of, I'm Jewish, but like, what does that mean? And then you suddenly sort of find that all this is going on in the world, and hang on a minute, we got really broken, and what? And you can play a part in that. So if you were to be connected to something like that through the youth movement, for example, would you feel less isolated? Would you feel more part of something on a more of a sort of a, in a Jewish way, sort of tikkun olam and all of those values that we sort of talk about in Jewish youth movements?
Yeah, I think I would. I think it's so important that for Jewish communities to connect, because in Norwich there are two different communities. There's my community, and then there's the Orthodox community. And you know, there's such a rich history in Norwich of Judaism, but with two very, very small communities. And I don't know the exact history, but you wonder how things have got lost and how the population goes down. And there are stories that I hear, stories that I heard at school, where teachers would look at me and not know whether to say things in history lessons. And it shows that even in Norwich is a very small city, and the two communities are so close together, and there's still that it's still a little bit fractious. So, but connecting with other communities across the world, in different countries, I think it would show that there is this web of Judaism that means that people don't feel quite so left out or quite so isolated, because it shows that there are other people in very similar situations to you, and I get to see that as being part of, you know, LJYNETSA, which is a liberal Jewish youth movement, which is connected to other movements around the world. And I think being further connected through, you know, the youth movement and the Together Plan would be something that would really make me feel like I was part of something, and not just in this very, very small bubble that is Norwich.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And also, if you were to be part of it, then, you know, equally like I think, you know, we're doing in Belarus, and digging into the sort of Jewish story, the history, the heritage and the identity, and Dani is doing in Mallorca, and I'm going to ask him to tell us a little bit about in a minute. And I know that they're doing in Barcelona at Casa Adret with Mosaica, that it's, you know, if you were to do a similar sort of thing at a local level in Norwich, to start sort of digging around and find out, well, when did Jews first arrive in Norwich? Well, then you suddenly become, and you can widen that into your wider community. It's not just, you don't keep that in the Jewish community, you can keep that in the wider non-Jewish community, and then that has a very positive impact in sort of saying to your wider community, there's a story here and it can draw people here. And I think that's very powerful, and that's something that the Jewish story, wherever we are, is a big story, and I think it can involve not just Jewish people. And I'm gonna throw it back to Dani, just to tell us a little bit about your sort of work around heritage and culture and identity, because I know you're doing a brilliant project with your videos, and just tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. I just want to quickly respond to what Lily was saying, and how much I resonated with what she said, that, you know, speaking personally, you know, I grew up in New Jersey, which is, you know, Seinfeld Center. You know, you walk down the street, there's a million bagel shops. You know, there was no lacking of Jewish identity. I didn't feel isolated at all. In fact, quite the opposite. I felt like, there's so much around me, you know. But then I was a part of Young Judea, it's called, which is a non-denominational Zionist youth movement. And I went to summer camp, a Jewish sleepaway summer camp. And it was there that I met Jews from California, from Texas, you know, from other parts of this big country of the United States that I'd never been to those places. And those are some of my best friends today. And so they're, you know, that's why I learned the song, wherever you go, there's always someone Jewish, you know, that's this famous kind of song that we were taught. And being a part of the global Jewish community is so important. I know we're going to get to it later, Debra, about this kind of digital revolution that we're finding ourselves a part of. So I just wanted to say, Lily, I hear exactly what you're saying, and I think that is really important to furthering Jewish continuity down the line. Basically, here in Mallorca, like I said, The only Jewish thing that we did was Friday nights, and even that was pretty boring, for lack of a better term. There was no holiday get-togethers. No one was inviting anyone else to Shabbat dinners. No one even knew the other Jews that were on the island. This was my issue. And so, you know, Carla and I came up with Limud Mallorca, which is very similar to what we're experiencing right now. It's a conference where we brought in speakers, and we didn't focus on Barcelona, Madrid, or even England or Germany. We asked people who were here in Mallorca, whether they're Jewish or non-Jewish, if they were authors or cooks or anything to contribute with Jewish culture, they were invited to present. And we thought 15 people, 20 maybe would come out, and our first event had over 85, 90 people. I mean, they came out of nowhere. We didn't know where these people, some of them Jewish, some of them with Jewish roots, suddenly were, you know, investigating, wanting to learn. And so from that conference, it grew and grew and grew, and we did a Rosh Hashanah event. We visited a winery on the island for Sukkot. You know, we came up with innovative, creative ways to access, you know, the Jewish culture, the Jewish story. And the last thing we came up with, which was a year ago, was actually I left my work as a producer for TV commercials, and my wife and I opened up literally a Jewish tourism business, an educational tourism, telling the story of the heritage of Mallorca. So now we give tours, we plan events, we plan seminars for people that are visiting, of course, but we very luckily and excitedly connected with the City Hall here, and they actually gave us like a grant, if you will, to work with public schools that no one was Jewish in, to give tours of the Jewish quarter, as well as, and this I'm sure will come up later in your talk, Debra, in our talk today, going into public schools and educating about the Holocaust. Because when you read a book, you know, you don't really connect, but then, you know, you have someone like myself or another friend of mine, Josh, stand up and say, look, we are descendants of Jews who escaped Germany, went to the United States, and now we're here in front of you. You know, it's a much bigger impact, if you will. So those are a couple of the initiatives that we're doing here on the island.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Marcel, do you want to just give us a little bit of an insight into, for example, I mean, I know Monica, who does the fantastic cookery program. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, that's such a great project for a small community, and I know it brings people in. So do you want to just mention a little bit about what Casa Adret is doing and Mosaica?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of it goes in the same direction of what Dani was mentioning, and in fact, a lot of it has been taking place over the last 3 years since we moved into Casa Adret, which really was a paradigm shift. And like for me, it's still hard to believe that we're managed to be in this situation, which like to a large extent has been serendipitous in the sense that the owners of Casa Adret, a medieval building from the 13th century, who belonged to a Jewish family, and is still large parts of it are still intact as they were 7 centuries ago, decided to give the people running a small Jewish cultural magazine just, you know, the management of the whole building and to turn it into a cultural center is insane for me to think, but here we are. It's since then we've started we began as I mentioned as a cultural magazine, but since then we've started a whole variety of projects. One of them is, as you mentioned, the Toldot food experience run by Moni and Eva. It's interesting because they come from very different heritages. One is from Ashkenazi background, the one's from a Mizrahi background, and they bring the two together, merge it into creating a food experience that, amongst other things, is absolutely delicious. It's one of my favorite things because for me, food is where it's at. For a while back, this will be our 5th edition. In fact, we've been doing a literature festival where we highlight the Jewish works of literature in Barcelona, which takes place every fall. We have also a touring, as part of Toldot, in fact, we also do tours and visits around the old border. We have a regular series of events that take place in Casa Adret. They go from conferences to concerts. Recently, we started a stand-up comedy show in our center. There turns out there's like 4 Jewish comedians in Barcelona. And yeah, which is more than I would have guessed, honestly, considering the size of Barcelona, but here we are. We are also looking into starting to do education for schools, like Dani mentioned. We're still, it's a slow process for us so far. We still haven't quite gotten there, but it's something that, and we're also, and this is something that we've worked a bit with Dani and talked about. We're also looking to bring together the different Jewish heritage initiatives or museums in all of Catalonia to kind of integrate them and give them a cohesive narrative. Because also very often the ways Jewish heritage and Jewish culture is presented, since for a long time it has been done by non-Jews, and the Jewish community has not had a very visible presence, partly because of the numbers and partly because an unwillingness to kind of be visible for concerns of, you know, doesn't always end up that well for us. Jewish heritage has largely, has not always been presented in the way it would be presented if it were being done in the first person, so to speak. And with a large degree of ignorance. And so that's another thing. It's kind of a part, in the big sense, it's the kind of the crux of what we're trying to change. It's going from being a community that, regardless of like being a lot or being a few, wants to stay a bit apart and be Jewish in private amongst other Jews exclusively, and not bring the Jewishness out in the open and, you know, make it visible and bring in not just, we kind of want to do the opposite of that. Not to say that it's better, but I think it kind of has a counterpoint. We want to be visible in the way that we're being Jewish, make Jewish culture accessible, and make it just normal. Make it so that in the US, for example, you're saying, you know, Seinfeld town, bagels everywhere, and you're Jewish and you just walk around and you have no problem feeling Jewish because you have become, your culture has become a normal part of the place that you're in. Even if you're not in a majority Jewish country or in a majority Jewish place, you have, like, Jewish culture has managed to integrate itself and be, this is part of what this town or what the city or what this country is. And that's kind of our dream, our vision for Barcelona and Catalonia, if possible, for people who are non-Jewish to be like, yeah, Jews, Jewish culture, Jewishness is part of the culture and the society that we all share. And that is an indisputable fact, which is a bit of an utopian goal, but there has been a lot of movement in that direction, I feel, and I'm optimistic.
Okay, that's very interesting. So with that thought in mind, Artur, and I've got to keep an eye on the time, so we've only got sort of 8 minutes. Do you want to just give a little bit of an sort of picking up on that about why building a Jewish cultural heritage trail in Belarus helps to change mindsets and build community the way we're hoping to do so in Belarus?
Well, I should have said that, you know, to save time, come into my session, but it's in Russian, so, you know, I have to just...
Short, précis, few minutes.
Sure, okay. As I said, I strongly believe that to revive the community that has no past, you have to infuse that past into the community. You have to make people understand who they are in order to move forward. So what we are trying to do as an organization here, we are trying to empower the communities. I mean, empower maybe is not too strong of a word. We're trying to, together with them, research the history and heritage of their own communities, in their own towns, within their own resources that they've got. And we're trying to give them support. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to, not to do it instead of them, but we're trying to help them to do it themselves. And if they do it themselves, you know, it's like, you know, reading the book. You can watch a short movie, you know, and someone else made, and you can read the whole book and get a better idea and deeper idea of what's behind that, and then you can watch the movie. So our idea is, again, this is the heritage and self-sufficiency. So if the communities themselves will dig it out and will drive through that historical route and road to a more developed and revived future, they will be able to value their community better and bigger, and it will be much richer history rather than what they've got now. Because I mean, basically we have only the older generation who are over 80, 85, who still remember something closer to when the Belarus land was more independent of the Soviets, that something was practicing, or maybe secretly practicing. Rather than that, there is a loss of the connection of generations. And when there is no connection of generations, you can't really revive the community by giving them an education. It could be only religious education. Yes, you know, some of the people, we've got some Orthodox schools, we've got some you know, small yeshivas, you know, home type yeshivas within the synagogues, but it has nothing to do. It has to do with one movement and with one very narrow direction. And with all my respect to the religious sort of denominations, I think a Jew needs to be broadly educated, needs to know its history, traditions, and where they come from. And without it, you know, we can be just a very isolated people. So, in my mind, the Together plan in Belarus is slowly but surely is moving the communities towards learning more about their heritage and history in order for them to help themselves to revive their community. As soon as they understand who they are and how strong the community used to be and what values and what heritage they had, they will want themselves to be who they are.
Thank you. I'm going to have. We've only got a couple of minutes. I want to sort of see if we might have a few questions at the end, and we're literally on the last few minutes. But Dani, just very quickly, and then I'd like to get a last few words from Lily on how she feels as a sort of a young community member from an isolated community, getting sort of what she feels is sort of a sum up for her of being a part of this panel. Dani, how does the digital revolution create opportunities for us now as communities to build connections, isolated communities to build connections?
Right. So so I have two answers for you rather quickly. One is the history and heritage route, and the other is the community building and religious observance route. So history and heritage. Before, you had to come to Mallorca, then me and my team of guides in person would guide you through the Jewish quarter and tell you about the history and whatnot. COVID put a quick stop to that, and we're still trying our best to get tourists, but it's not happening for 2020. So what we did was we filmed our tour and we put it online as different tiny episodes, about 5 minutes each. And we asked, you know, we sent it out to the world at large and say, hey, make a contribution. You know, if you can put in something, you'll get 18 episodes of this 1.5 hour tour that will blow your mind, literally, of the fantastic, incredible history that happened here. So almost it's a reaction to COVID, where we only were able to get to a small group of people. Now look at us, digitally, we can get that story out to as many people as possible. It's rather fascinating, and the ideas are endless. I'm now talking to someone about a 360 tour that you put on glasses, and you can feel like you're actually in Palm's Jewish Quarter. And the other one is a Zoom tour. So now, like we're doing right now, we could be on Zoom, but I could be walking through the streets because we're still not under lockdown like other places in the world. And I could be having 1,000 people on a tour with me, you know, at the same time because of Zoom and because of the technology. It's fascinating where we can go with this. On the flip side is this community building. We, under lockdown, we're not allowed to leave our houses. Our children were not allowed out of our houses. It was very strict here. We decided as we moved to do something called Shabbat on Zoom. So we call it Shazoom. And it's from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. before Shabbat actually comes in, halachically. And we get people together on Zoom, and we light the candles together. It's almost as if you're coming to our house for Shabbat dinner. You know, we light candles together. We have musicians from different parts of the world that we're connected to. A guy in Israel is playing guitar, a woman in LA who's singing with us, and they lead us in song. And then we do breakout rooms because we're trilingual here in Mallorca, and many more languages too, but for now it's English.